Welcome to the WARC Podcast. My name's David Tiltman, and today we are chatting about some absolutely key terms in modern marketing, including what's called share of search, visualization of the customer journey, and the idea of digital availability. We're joined on this episode by James Hankins. He's a marketing transformation consultant previously on the client side at Sage, and before that in the agency world. In the past 5 years, he has developed a number of influential models and frameworks that touch on marketing effectiveness. Now, if you saw our recent episode with Tom Roach, you'll be familiar with the structure. We'll be running through some of James's key contributions to effectiveness thinking. We'll look at where those ideas came from and the influence they've had. And we'll be asking him about his views on marketing's best practice now, at a time when the industry is going through rapid change. Today's episode is also a video podcast, so if that's your thing, be sure to check out the video on WARC's YouTube channel. We'll also show some of the frameworks we're talking about on that video, so do head over there if charts are your thing. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, as I say, we're going to spend your time here talking about some of the sort of models and frameworks you've developed. But I think for people who don't know you, it'd be useful just to get a bit of an introduction, your background, and then why you started actually just writing and creating some of this work.
Yeah, absolutely. So 18 years in marketing services, working on all the different agency groups and all the business that you've ever guessed. IKEA, John Lewis, smoking cessation. COVID came. I was part of the exit cohort. And that's when my writing really started. I used writing to kind of collect my thoughts during that COVID summer and began publishing at that time. And I set up a consultancy as a result. That then led one of my clients, Sage, hired me, global marketing strategy and planning VP. And I worked there for a number of years before exiting about a year ago. And I've restarted my consultancy practice again. So that's my journey. But yeah, candidly, I started writing to try and get a job.
Well, it worked. Your background before that COVID summer then was more on the media side, right? And because a lot of the things we're going to talk about have a sort of strong media bias. So, but it's fair to say that you were quite focused on sort of media strategy, media planning, media data.
Yeah, I was a classic comms planner, comms strategist. I came from the era of comms platforms and that sort of thing. So absolutely from a media angle rather than a creative planner, I suppose.
Great. Well, okay. Well, let's get straight into it. We've got 4 different sort of ideas or frameworks that we're going to talk through, and I think the first one many people will be familiar with, or at least have heard of, which is the idea of share of search. Now, for anyone who's not aware of this, I'm going to try and do my best to sort of paraphrase it and then hand over to you. So, share of search is a brand's share of search results within a certain category. So you look at a category, all the searches, branded searches that are going on with it in that, and you look at what percentage are taken up by a particular brand. And the argument that you made back in 2020, I believe, and we'll talk about it because I know you and Les Binet came to sort of similar conclusions at the same time. But the argument that you made, and actually I think debuted in a WARC piece, was that there was a correlation between what was happening to share of search and what was happening in actual market share, and that link could be a useful way of seeing the world for a brand. Have I kind of got that right?
Yes. Yeah. That's pretty much it.
So just tell me a little bit about where that thinking came from. Because if I put myself back in 2020, we'd heard from people like Paul Dyson and others that they were seeing interesting links between what was going on with certain digital metrics, search being one of them, and and what was happening in the real world.
Yeah.
Where did you get this sort of connection from, and how did you then sort of formalize that into this idea of share of search?
I'm glad you mentioned Paul, because true gent. I absolutely love Paul Dyson, because it starts with me and Paul working together in 2011 on Coke. I was at Visium at the time. Data Do Decisions, his company had just been bought by Dentsu, or what became Dentsu. And we were correlating brand love with brand searches. The Aaron Bass Institute, or Byron, had recently published How Brands Grow, 2011 as well. And obviously it set out that all these soft metrics correlate with each other, right? So market share correlates with brand love. And that was ultimately where it went. We were working on brand love versus brand searches. Byron had come out with, well, brand love correlates with market share. And I was like, hang on. Let's see. And that's where it started, playing around with data and trying to work it out all those years ago. And then Les will say the same thing, because he was working around it in about 2014, 13 over at Adam and Eve. No one was really that interested. I think he was doing a project with Harry Davies, ex-UI and Sage, at Google with YouTube and various others. And they did some research, and Google weren't that interested at the time because they were focusing on PPC and not brand. My agencies weren't particularly interested. They didn't seem to see the value in it because it was hard to monetize and productize, because it's a lot of manual stuff, used to be anyway. And so we both kind of just sat on it. I developed a load of techniques. I'd use it on my clients, only my clients where I was working. And it came to when I was exiting, and I think I had a conversation with yourself and was like, I've got this really cool thing.
Yeah, we're like, let's do it.
Let's do it. I got sign off from my ex-boss. Yes, you can use this kind of stuff that you'd been working on while you worked for us. Very sensible, of course, from a legal perspective. And we started writing. And lo and behold, and completely by coincidence, because we didn't know this at the time, Les was also having conversations with the drum. And we published our research in the same week.
Yeah, it was kind of spooky, and people are kind of assume that you must have worked on this together somehow.
No. completely independent in terms of thinking and development. If you look at the two ways that we presented it, Les's was more focused on the research that he'd done originally with Google, and mine was on the techniques and applications of that relationship to drive out insights and observations on market dynamics. So we had two ways in, and yeah, absolutely. And it was quite bizarre and very, very lucky. If it had been a week either way, well, Les is a lot more famous than I am. It would have looked like I was just copying.
Now, let's just talk about the ways that it can and can't be applied. Because so the way that we often see share of search presented is as a kind of leading indicator for market share. So you would expect an increase in share of search to lead to some kind of movement in market share. What, in your mind, is that useful for, and what isn't it useful for?
Yeah, so it comes back to, I think it's Les's analysis with mobile phones. I think it's mobile phones. I've always shied away from that, and I know I've had that discussion with Les as well, because it's not an absolute. You have to do your own analysis, and because that's where I've come from, I've typically seen it in line. So when market share rises, so does share of search, largely because we roll it, moving average, annual average. And so it smooths out, and ultimately it becomes one and the same curve. Promising that it's predictive is, if I could see the future, I'd be a multi-billionaire.
But there are companies that have now developed these techniques and would claim it is predictive.
Yes, yeah. I think there was a conversation recently. Ben Evans, globally famous analyst, versus one of these companies. I think it's one of those where if you can demonstrate it, absolutely use it, but it needs constant validation to prove that.
And there could be big differences by category, how important search is within that category.
Yes, how important. And also the hypothesis, and it is a hypothesis, is that it correlates with the purchase journey. So I've looked at it in FMCG for cereals. What it does appear to show you is that the higher correlation is 2 weeks in advance, right? Is that useful for most people to know 2 weeks in advance that your market share is going to increase? Well, face value, probably not. However, Nielsen data takes 5 weeks. So actually, you've got 7 weeks advance notice. Now, you could argue if you've proven that link, then you've got a bit of advance warning that something's going to, and you can move things around. You could get some instant. So there are ways and means, but I would always say, don't take it as a law. Don't take it as a rule. Prove it for your category. Constantly reevaluate that if you can, because it can be useful. And I appreciate that. That's a bit murky, a bit grey, but that's how I like to present it.
So if you're not so much skeptical, but sort of cautious around that sort of predictive piece, where is it most useful for you? Where does it sort of have value?
It paints pictures of markets and how markets are responding to inputs and outcomes. So that's how I've used it in my consultancy practice. We paint pictures of performance over time, and it is performance because it's whether businesses are winning or losing versus their competition, and then hypothesizing what's been driving that, whether it's marketing investment, extra share of voice, whether it is you use the Jones model to map out a category. A lot of this is being able to turn those theoretical models into reality, because you have got 20 odd years now of search data. If you roll it up into share of search, you've got that performance data for that long. So you can begin to do share of voice versus share of market, extra share of voice versus et cetera, and turn it practically. You can even, this is the one that I think many people missed, which is you can do the long and short of it as well. That classic drawing.
Yeah, the spikes.
The drawing, as Byron will always represent it.
Never call it a chart.
It's not a chart, it is a drawing. But you can chart it with share of search data, because you have the short-term spikes, monthly spikes, and then you have the long-term performance, which is share of search. And you can look at when spikes drove that share of search long-term trend and begin to go, right, okay, there's the short, there's the long. It's a really powerful bit of analysis. You'll obviously know what you've been doing, and there are tools and techniques out there, Nielsen, et cetera, they provide investment. But also, there's on-the-ground sales data. There's various other tools that you can go, well, our competitor did this then. We know that. So you can begin to plot out how brands grow in real time
in your category. So it actually starts to tell the story of your category.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk at the moment about the development of search, and I guess since you first developed that theory, when it was just Google, we've had the whole rise of retail media as a sort of alternative search platform, but monetized search platform, I guess. And then more recently, of course, we've got the rise of LLMs and this whole idea that, which I think is still more, it's more talked about than is actually happening. Clearly, people are searching within LLMs for products, but it's not yet at a scale that's threatening Google's search. I just want to get your view on how that nice, neat concept of share of search has evolved over the past 5 years, whether it's still as powerful a predictor as you found, back in the previous decade, or whether these new sorts of platforms and techniques are actually breathing new life into it.
So yeah, I actually did a consultancy gig recently where I looked at initially as an introduction to share of search. I looked at the share of search trend, and
the share of search of share of search.
Share of search. Looked at the trend over time, and if you looked at last summer, historic highs, and I was like, what happened? I asked a few people, and it appears to be when we started to get kind of analysis that suggested the death of clicks because of this zero click world, the rise of the LLMs and people searching on there, and people realizing that clicks were no longer, if they ever had been, a useful performance proxy, and actually it was searches because they weren't filtered. They were just demonstrations of customer intent,
pure intent, or
pure
least
intent.
consideration.
And that's the thing. I mean, I still even at the time, people were challenging the efficacy of it because they were saying, well, the rise of Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. I've got to get my numbers right, but I think it's 14 billion searches a day on Google. 140 million on OpenAI ChatGPT. It's still the world's largest database of intent, and that represents enough to be able to then extrapolate the share of search, market share, etc., etc. So it still works. It still holds. Whether it still will in 10, 15 years, I mean, who knows? Again, I'm not going to say, that share of search term predicts the future. But yeah, there's still value in it.
And did you find any data? Have you done any analysis within things like Amazon or Walmart to see whether search in those environments has the same
patterns?
Same sort of patterns. Yeah.
So back 2021, I think we did with the IPA. We did 1 year later, and we set out 10 new learnings, insights from the Share of Search Council. And essentially what we found was it held true. So we did some work with LinkedIn. I've since done some work with a search engine in South Korea. Somebody had looked at a search engine in Russia. Ultimately, people search in proportion to how they buy, typically. Yeah. So it is a consistent relationship.
It's not just something that's weird on Google.
That's weird on Google, exactly.
That's really interesting. And of course, we had Tom Roach on the podcast recently. He was talking about share of models. So the whole idea of the share of is an interesting sort of idea and concept seems to have had legs.
Yes, and it's an emergent area with LLMs as well because it's new. Yeah. They haven't quite got to the stage where they represent and replicate market dynamics. So there is ability to get extra share of model, and you are more likely, because you've got increased presence, to drive growth through that model. Yeah. That won't always be the case at the point at which it reaches critical mass. It will replicate what you'd expect ultimately. And that's the key thing. I think people would always say, oh, well, extra share of model is always going to, well, no, it's a short-term thing, short-term benefit. Take advantage now, because when it represents them, it just represents real life.
Yeah.
Actual life.
Let's talk about the second idea in our list, which is, again, it's the same sort of fertile period in that sort of COVID and post-COVID. And this is from 2021. It's a slightly different concept. On paper, extremely simple, but actually the practical implications of it are quite significant. And this is something called the Hankins Hexagon. I mean, I suppose you had to put your name to something, particularly after the Lesbinette thing with share of search. Now, for those people listening on the podcast, I appreciate, talking about a framework you can't see is not ideal. For those on video, we'll show an image of it, but just briefly describe. I'm sure people can visualize a hexagon, but just briefly describe what the Hankins hexagon is.
Yes, it's a hexagon around a pentagon, so it connects every point around a hexagon with every other point.
Yes, like a sort of satanic symbol.
Satanic, yeah, absolutely. And a good point on the Hankins hex. It was to try and get my name out there. So the principle is customers don't follow linear pathways. And this was an attempt to conceptualize and develop another metaphor to represent that. Now, the maths behind it is robust. It essentially uses Markov chains, which are stochastic or consistent probabilities between certain pathways. So if you go from A to B, the probability of doing that is consistent.
And just to be clear on the points of the hexagon,
yes,
each of those is like a different touch point or something. So you're assuming there is a trigger that for someone to come into the market. So go back to breakfast cereal or something. I've run out of my daily breakfast cereal. I need to buy some more. That's the trigger.
Yep.
There is then a series of touch points that they will bounce between before potentially making a purchase of that that breakfast cereal. And the different points of the hexagon are the different touch points that they might go through. And it's not just media touch points we're talking about here either.
No, I mean, and it was quite broad as well. So it was out of market because I did during my work as a comms planner, I basically looked through all the different models. You know, you had the McKinsey loop and various others.
Yes, and a lot of those things were very much that sort of classic stage gate. You go from this stage to this stage to this stage to this stage, whether it's a funnel, a loop, or whatever.
Yeah. And I was like, it's a bit more complex than that. Out of market, and then once you're in the market, it bounces around. So you may do a short list, you may do a long list, you will have a trigger. The time period is also varies as well. So a lot of these stages, whilst consistent across category, the time period that you're going to go through them can be very, very quick. If you're standing in front of the cereal aisle, then your long list, short list is going to be a very short period, and your purchase is going to be a very short period of time. But the probabilities of pinging through certain stages, again, they're going to be slightly different. Now,
different to buying a car, for example.
And they will be brand specific and comparable. So, and they will be linked to market share to a degree, but there will be areas where you are stronger than others. There will be ways that you can map out the pathways so that you will go, right, okay, this pathway is aggregated up, is the most popular one. Well, how do we perform against that relative to our competition? And are there opportunities or white space where we can elevate our performance, kind of change our visibility in long listing or affect our short listing through various different channels and levers to gain disproportionate advantage? And that's where the theory came into practice ultimately. It was about looking at those pathways, the dominant pathways relative to the competition, and then going, well, this is where we should put our resources to improve in the expectation that will affect the probabilities in a positive way and then drive growth overall.
So again, this is sort of a little bit like share of search. This is about a more sophisticated mapping of what is going on for you and the category, and then finding opportunity within that, finding things you can actually do to tweak the dial a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, it's praxis, it's doing stuff. Theory's great, but unless you're able to apply that theory, and that's share of search, and that's, the Hankins hexagon, it's not really that useful. And I shy away from that. I like things to be useful and usable.
And so how So without naming names, how have you used this in your sort of consulting? Have you actually been engaged to develop these?
Develop one.
Yeah.
It's a hard one because of the maths associated with Markov chains. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a statistician. I have had conversations, and there was one particular brand I won't name who got quite far down the line of doing this and turning it into reality. But unfortunately, redundancy came calling for that role, and that project got taken out of prioritization. So I've never done it, but I've spoken to many people out there who have tried or are trying or have nearly succeeded, which... And I saw something this morning referencing the application of Markov chains to demonstrate these markets and dynamics. So it can be done, but I've never been able to clinch the proof and apply it directly. It's more as a metaphor to get people thinking.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk a lot about the funnel, the limitations of that as a model. It's useful in some ways, but it's very limited in other ways. And I think this is when we thinking about customer journeys, the way customers move through from trigger to purchase. It's interesting as a way. Again, I called it simple at the start, but actually the idea behind it is quite nuanced. It's that there's not a simple stage gate approach to any decision. And I think the more visibility we've had into the way consumers behave within purchases, the more nuance we actually find. Like the funnel was great at a time when you couldn't see most of what was going on. Now you can see a lot more of it. You realize that people can bounce around all over the place.
I think somebody used the concept of pinball and flicking between and part of this was also a reaction against the Google's messy middle, which whilst the report itself had loads of really interesting behavioural triggers and stuff like that, it skirted the conclusion, which was...
It's messy.
It's messy. Yeah. All right, great. Yeah, that really helped. And this was about trying to crystallise it into something.
That's interesting. Actually, put something around the messiness. Yeah. No, that's useful. All right, let's move on to idea number 3. Now this one, I think, I'm not saying this is common parlance, but... And I don't know whether you were the first to use this term, but you were sort of one of the first people I saw actively sort of pushing it. And again, it comes from that same sort of very fertile period, 2020. So in that COVID summer. And it was a term you used called digital availability. Now, if the word availability rings any bells, we have already, of course, have mental availability and physical availability, very famous framework that from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, which is used to explain how brands grow. You introduced digital availability as like a third availability. We'll get into the application of that in a moment, but I guess just explain why at the time you felt mental and physical availability wasn't enough and what this new thing was.
Yeah. So I'd been kind of kicking this idea around within Omnicom because I was working with their retail media function and I was helping them develop their proposition. And digital availability is where I kind of landed to. This is what we do. This is, it's digital shelf space, shorthand. Why did I think that was distinctive and different? And that's an intentional use of those two phrases from physical availability. Well, the problem is if you say, go to a CEO, and certainly at the time, physical availability, the shorthand is straight to bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
It's jargon. It really is. Whereas I felt that if we kind of broadened it out and said digital availability, well, what does that mean? Well, that means in a digital space, it's digital shelf space. It is a completely different set of tools and a different specialism and requires different people. And if we can bring this kind of apart from the physical availability, then it helps practitioners communicate what they're trying to do. There is nothing wrong with the specific definition of physical availability when you read it.
Yeah.
It is the term that sits above it, which leads your mind directly to somewhere else.
Somewhere physical.
Somewhere physical.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from.
Because if we're talking about whether it's e-commerce or search, someone like Byron Sharp, cautious to sort of paraphrase him, but he has argued several times that that's just physical availability. It's almost kind of not advertising. It's a form of shelf space, which is therefore physical availability. But you'd argue that it's something distinct because of the name itself, or because it's a different team, or
because it's a different function. It's very rarely managed in the same way. If you rewind back to, and we'll talk about it in a minute, the rise of DTC and retail media, kind of pre-COVID and then through COVID. These are different teams. You've got essentially what you've got with physical and digital availability is merchandising, but it's done in different ways. You've got people knocking on the door with Tesco, and you've got people knocking on the door with Amazon. They are a world away, or certainly were a world away from each other. Different relationships, different partnerships. We've been kind of mulling the trade relationship for a long time. Yeah. So that was where I came from. It's like, yes, you're right from a definitional sense, but when you start to apply it in a business with real human beings, you probably need to kind of create a bit of more distinctiveness between them, because different teams will be focused on them, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, and this is one of those ones where over time I was like, is it useful? Is this distinction useful? And I did get to a stage where I wasn't so sure. I have noted that members of the Aaron Babas Institute have used the term. I think with the rise of LLMs and customer search on those, that's a new frontier to digital availability, and a huge new opportunity, because again, it's different people, it's different specialisms, different skills. Again, it's about articulating quite specifically what we're asking people to do, and creating a usable framework ultimately.
We're going to stick with e-commerce because it's at the heart of our fourth sort of piece of thinking. And this was what was called the gravity of e-commerce. Now, this was initially a Cannes talk. You came onto the WARC sessions in Cannes in, I believe, 2022, and gave a really, really powerful presentation. And then we followed that up with a sort of more in-depth white paper a few months later. And we should say, of course, that this was some work you did alongside JP Caslin, friend of the pod. We've had him on recently, and obviously acknowledge his role in this. But again, at the time, and I remember programming that Cannes session, and at the time, WARC had a sister company that was heavily involved in e-commerce, and we were talking to them about sort of retail media themes and trends. And we mentioned this sort of gravity of e-commerce piece, and they went, "Oh, that's a bit counterintuitive." Because at the time, everything was very positive around that whole space. It was real sort of gold rush sort of moment. And you and JP injected a note of caution into it. So you take up the story and just tell us what you were trying to show.
Yes, so there was a rich community on Twitter of people talking about marketing, and there's a blog, Only Dead Fish, and I actually published a paper on it, which became the month's paper, and I think I beat Tom Roach to as well at the time, so I was really proud with that.
Not that you're in competition.
Not that I'm in competition, but it was about the dark side of e-commerce, because I'd noticed, and I think it was actually Gymshark, who'd piqued my interest because they had payment terms of 120 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? And I began to investigate it, did a bit of analysis, and picked up the phone to JP, and I was like, look, there's something really interesting here. Eventually, we resolved it in that it should cost more for someone to do something for you than if you did it yourself. How does that apply to shopping? Well, usually you incur the transport costs of going to a shop, buying a T-shirt, taking it home, trying it on. If it doesn't fit, you take it back.
Yeah.
At the time, everyone was doing free deliveries and free returns, and had been for a long period of time. And we were like, this doesn't add up. Who's incurring that cost?
Because there was the narrative was that this was a sort of this is a new way of doing business. We're shifting money out of sort of boring old retail into sort of digital fulfillment, and it's all upside. What you were trying to show is that actually there's some quite significant costs involved in that transition that weren't being sort of fully captured in the in the narrative. Yeah,
I mean, it's the session was brilliant. The near 15,000 word report, still on WARC, is delves into a huge amount of detail. The poster child at the time was Nike.
Yes,
everyone was talking about Nike. A load of kind of commentators were saying this is the future. This is the future. A quick look, and obviously LLMs weren't there, so we had to trawl through all the finance pages of Nike. But a quick look at their gross margin contribution from their D2C kind of element. And this isn't just digital, it was owned stores as well. It was gross margin negative in all but, I think, one of the years since they'd had a strategic reset in 2017. You're like, hang on, right? If Nike gross margin, not even net margin, gross margin negative for D2C, this doesn't work. They're loading all that cost. When is it going to really begin contributing from a profit perspective? We looked at the revenue per unit and all that sort of obvious stuff. And obviously they're going to have a higher revenue per unit, but the cost base was significantly higher as well. And that's where it came to. It was like, this isn't the promised land. There are fundamental challenges within it from a distribution perspective. You can't optimize. In the same way that you can optimize a store, you've got a fixed destination, you've got storage capacity out the back. If you're delivering to a geography, it's very difficult to manage that in an optimal way. If you're Amazon with 1 billion SKUs, then it's a lot easier. But if you're a single brand, then it's a lot harder. We looked at all the distribution companies, the Eats of this world, and various others. Uber at the time, who were, on a route to profitability, certain ways of defining that. But, at the time, they were all just hemorrhaging money. And that was this fundamental gravity of e-commerce, the cost gravity. Yeah. That's what it relates to. And, we're seeing it again in a different way, hidden costs.
Go on. There's more I want to dive into with e-commerce itself, but tell us where it's reappearing.
Yeah, where it's reappearing. Hidden costs. That's ultimately what we were talking about. There are things that marketers aren't considering where they're going all into DTC. Operations, distribution. Important things. Other P's within the 4 P's. Where we're seeing it emerge now. And some people are talking about it's not as hidden, I suppose, as it was for D2C, but is with LLMs and his hidden compute cost of reams of agents that you're setting up who are doing multiple API calls.
So this idea that we're going to replace all these people with agents and that they're basically free is the latest version of this.
Ultimately, yeah. Well, no, they're not. They've got a huge compute cost to them. And it's just being transparent and open. Is it really an exchange? You're taking out human costs, but just piling it onto compute. and understanding that relationship and being really clear and open about it, because I don't think we certainly aren't in market. We often aren't, basically. And that's the kind of the big, I suppose, the insight from the whole DTC thing, and applying that sort of critical lens to the emerging world as well.
So two things with this e-commerce space, I guess, just understanding what happened after you published that and where we are now. So I do remember in the sort of few months after we actually published the paper, which as you say is on WARC, we did start to see people either scaling back or delivery services adding delivery charges because they realized they had to somehow make the money back. So there was this sense that there was a sort of reversion to common sense.
Yes.
Do you think that's carried through now in the e-commerce space? Are we at a more sort of stable cost basis or a more transparent cost basis?
I think we are. We're more transparent. I mean, you look at someone like ASOS and how they've managed their returns. I mean, if you are returning too much, you get your free returns removed. You have to pay, all that sort of stuff. Someone like a Just Eat, look at the additional costs that are now applied to your delivery. So, and it, that poster child Nike, huge reversal. They're still a $50 billion business. Everyone's saying, oh yeah, On and various Hoka are taking. They're a $50 billion global business. Yes, their growth isn't what you'd expect, but it, 10 points down. Adidas were 10 points down 3 years ago. So we are. It swings and roundabouts. It's business, but from an e-commerce and digital perspective, I think we're getting to a point where people are beginning to understand the trade-offs.
Yeah.
I think retail media and the growth of monetizing audiences has, and we spoke about it the following year at Cannes, I think, as well, in terms of we called it double dipping. You sell a product, but you also sell the audience as well.
Yeah.
And that has helped kind of bulwark balance sheets globally. So I think, we've had that arms race is a horrible term. It's not an arms race. We had that race, and now we've settled down into mature business. I'm sure it'll be the same in this next S-curve.
The final thing, and again, to bring it back round to sort of marketing specific topics, I think what was interesting about the gravity of e-commerce piece was some of the sort of knock-on implications, which now maybe we talk a little bit more about, but you were talking about importance of brand as a way, because you could sort of see how people were going to have to start adding in things like delivery charges and the importance of brand as a way to get people to sort of, well, actually, okay, it's
worth it.
Okay, it's worth. I'll pay the £3 or the £5 or the $10 or whatever it is. And again, that I think at the time we were very much sort of very focused on marketing communications as a driver of top line.
Yeah.
And since then, we've become much more sensitive to the way it sort of plays with pricing, price sensitivity, and pricing power. And again, have you seen that as a sort of ongoing narrative over the past few years? Because it's felt really strong to us.
Yeah, it's a funny one because you sit there, and JP and I have sat there and chatted about it, and we've gone, we don't want to be the told you so's. But it's there. It's in video. It's we did say it back then. The pricing debate is a classic. It's a core principle that within marketing that we've kind of known for decades. We forgot about for 10
Yeah.
years. And then, you get the McCain case study from the guys from Les and the guys at
That's
Adam
the
and
IPA Grand Prix winner.
long-term pricing power. It's a hard one to prove. How many businesses are dynamically pricing in a way that they can create elasticity curves? It's a hard one to prove, but it feels right. If you've got a strong brand, you should be able to charge more. That was always put out there as a definition of the brand, and I think that's where this has come full circle. You kind of got this. You had industry amnesia for a period between 2008 and 2021. And we're remembering some of these core principles. You've seen, in terms of the McKinsey CMO report that came out this year, brand is at the top. Strength of brand is really important when you're talking about LLM search. These are all core principles, and it feels as though price is the same. It's a reminder of the 4 Ps and the power of true classic marketing. Rather than anything new. It's more like the industry moved around the truth for a period and it's now come back.
And now it's come back. So, but that's a great way to finish, I guess. That sort of focus on, what this gravity of e-commerce piece was a reminder that to look across the 4 Ps and understand the cost of distribution in these things, but then also to remember the range of outcomes that marketing can have. Okay, that seems a great place to wrap it up. So James, thanks for being with us.
And thank you for having me.
So look, that is all we've got time for on today's episode. A huge thank you to James for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like more information on the ideas that we've discussed today, then our WARC subscribers can check out many of the things we've just been talking about, including the Gravity of E-commerce paper, some of that early work on share of search, and more on WARC.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.